Why are you stuck? Why is it?
Just let it go.
All right.
We are
Here we go.
live.
Hold on.
This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, this is the weekend of a supposed big fight. There was a big fight last weekend in the heavyweight division. We're going to cover all that. Before we get to that, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. And,
you're getting a little color in Florida, and you're even starting to smile a little bit.
Yeah, I'll be back in New York, and but the fight's in Vegas. They're here, they're there, they're everywhere. But
Jack, before we go any further, I just want to touch on you're not going to be here next week, and my co-host is going to be none other than Bernard Fernandez. Tell us a little bit about Bernard. I know he was the president of the BWAA. Is he still?
No. Joe Santoliquido's here right now, but Bernard is very much involved. Him and Joe have like a father-son relationship, and I'm like cousins to both of them. Bernard's a very, close friend of mine, and I was thrilled when you told me you were going to have Bernard Fernandez filling in for me. That's an upgrade, Frank. I mean, what are you trying to do? Whenever I miss a show, you have Jerry Cooney, Russell Peltz, Bernard Fernandez. I mean, you're trying to send a message how relevant I am to me.
I'm not going to take any time off because
you've humbled me. You've humbled me with these guys filling in. You're never going to hear me say I'm not replaceable when you have a lineup like that. I mean, if this were baseball, I'd be hitting eighth.
See, that's why I'm not going to take time off, so you can get somebody in to replace me and upgrade it.
I mean, it's the Wally Pip Lou Gehrig syndrome, perhaps. But Bernard Fernandez, former 5-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. He's a member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, long time Philadelphia sports writer. One of the more knowledgeable boxing people around. And I'll give you a little trivia. I bet you didn't know this, Frank. Bernard's father was a professional fighter who boxed against Archie Moore.
No, he fought on the same card as Archie Moore.
Oh, I mean on the same card.
Yes.
Me,
yes. So much for tripping me up.
Yeah, you stepped ahead of me. You tripped me up there. He fought on the same card as Archie Moore.
Jack,
Bernard has the poster of that.
Being raised outside of Philadelphia, buying all the Philadelphia papers back in the day. If you remember, Bernard replaced Elmer Smith, who was the boxing writer for the Daily News before, and he went into politics and I think news, and then Bernard took over. And over the years, I would see Bernard at the fights in Atlantic City or Philadelphia. We became friends. In fact, we actually drove down together for a couple of the Tyson fights. And I'm going to see if he remembers this, but I think we were going to the Tyson. It wasn't Tyson Spinks. One of Tyson's fights before that in Atlantic City. And I remember telling him, saying, Bernard, this kid is really good, but he's not quite as great as the media make him out to be. And he is not the next George Foreman or Frazier or Ali. I think I was pretty close with that. He's not quite there, but he's no doubt a great fighter, a former great fighter. And I followed Bernard's career for a long time, Jack, and I think we can both agree on one thing. In this sport, when you cover this sport and you're around it, you meet all kinds of people. Some of them you will never forget. Others you want to forget. Bernard is one of the guys that I have never, ever, and I've never talked to you about this, but I have no doubt in my mind that you'll back up what I'm saying. I've never met anybody has a bad word to say about him.
Well, let me just tell you one story. Before I decided to seek the BWAA presidency, I had been a vice president. I had actually served under Bernard. And a lot of the established guys, or some of the established guys, they didn't want me to be president. I wasn't kind of one of them to some of them. I took the ride from New York to Philadelphia to sit down with Bernard and have a heart-to-heart talk to get his endorsement, to get his blessing. And I said, Bernard, if you don't think I should seek this position, I'm not going to do it. He was the one veteran guy that could have talked me out of it, and I would have listened and gone along with it. But he gave me his full support, and then I seek the position and, ascended to it.
And Jack, what you say, and I don't know if many of the people watching us know this. Some of them, I'm sure they do, but others don't. But what you said about it being the old boys club, and you weren't maybe one of the guys, that is the exact reason and the only reason why I withdrew from it, because
Oh, no. We're not going to trash the BWA.
I'm not trashing it. I'm just telling you what.
I'm not going to hear it, Frank.
I'm not trashing them.
A story, not to make an editorial that's going to be negative against the BWAA.
But Jack, I got to say it now because I let it out. I'm just saying this, and I'm not going to rip them. All I'm saying is this. I felt I'm not one of the guys, and I got tired of things that I wrote never being considered for any awards. And when I withdrew, Bernard called me incessantly and said, Frank, what you do better than anybody else, and I want you to continue. And I just didn't. And I had a bad taste in my mouth. It has nothing to do with the guys, but I just felt that the winners all the time, being the Borgeses and the Hausers, it wasn't even worth writing for me if it wasn't going to be acknowledged.
That's something you could take up with Bernard directly next week. He's going to be here, and I'm sure.
Well, I'm sure it'll come up. All right, Jack.
And just as a side note, I haven't exactly enjoyed the greatest success in the writing contest. I got an honorable mention in the latest one. The 2 years before that, I got a second and third place for feature stories and a second for investigative before. But Bernard Fernandez, just to sum it up, is a last of a breed. And that's the lead writer in boxing, the last of a breed.
All right, Jack. Anyhow, next week, Bernard will be sitting where Jack is, or not sitting there, but he'll be in that spot. I look forward to that. Jack, there was a big heavyweight fight this past weekend, an elimination bout between Zilly Zing and Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce was nearly a 10-1 underdog. He was undefeated. We both picked him to win. I'm not even sure if today we can justify that pick, but he was totally outclassed by a big Chinese southpaw who had a game plan, who went in. He knew that Joyce would be there for the left cross, the right hook. I had the fight 3-2 after 5 rounds, but Joyce was not in the fight. He just outworked Zing. I think he was trying to get him tired. It was a one-sided fight. Zing is now in the mix in the heavyweight division. I didn't see that coming, although I didn't think Joe Joyce was unbeatable, but I thought he'd win the fight. I was wrong.
You were double wrong, Frank. I was wrong, you were wrong, but you were double wrong. You want to know how you were double wrong, Frank?
I can't wait to hear.
You said that Joe Joyce would run over Anthony Joshua.
And I still feel that way.
Based on what you saw Saturday, Frank, Joe Joyce coming at Joshua would have no trouble hitting him. Joshua would box his ears off. Joshua would batter him worse. Joshua has a better assortment of punches than Zhang.
You're right.
Was a powerful straight left. That punch
Joe.
was so predictable, Frank. You could have gotten out of the way of
You
it now,
are-
not even when you were younger. You would have gotten out of the way of Zhang's punch right now if you were in the ring with him. That's how
Jack, I am not
predictable.
going to give you that default win. I would still take Joe Joyce to beat Anthony Joshua because, again, I think you missed the biggest reason why. Anthony Joshua, when he gets in there with Joe Joyce, won't fight, he won't punch, and he won't get off, and Joyce will walk him down and beat him down. He will not get off. That is my problem with Joshua. So I think Saturday night we saw two guys fight, and I would pick both of them to beat Anthony Joshua, along with Usyk, who's done it, Wilder, and Fury. So that's five guys right there who I would pick to beat Anthony Joshua. In fact, I'll tell you what, Jack, I'll go one further. I'll bet you if Joe Joyce's team called Joshua's team up right now and said, we're coming off a loss, you're coming off a win, we'll meet you in 3 months, I'll bet Eddie Hearn would not pick up the phone.
Come on, Frank. The money is not there. You're being idealistic. He doesn't gain much with it now, Anthony Joshua.
But, Jack, you just said he's a big stiff that you can't miss, and Joshua has a great offensive arsenal. Why wouldn't he take it? Let him beat up Joyce the way Zing did.
You know what's interesting about that fight with Zhang and Joshua? Zhang's 39. Joshua's 37. Remember, Frank, when a heavyweight would
Joyce is 37.
Right. Remember
You said Joshua.
Oh, I mean Joyce. I'm sorry.
Joshua's 33.
Joyce. Right, I meant Joyce. Joyce is 37. Remember when a heavyweight would be 35 and they'd start saying, oh, is he really old? And a guy like Joe Louis, when he got knocked out by Rocky Marciano, was 37.
Yep.
Okay? So just think of it. He was just about the same age as Joyce. But in this day and age, a heavyweight could be approaching 40 and age isn't considered.
Well, you're right. Joyce has only had 15 fights, Jack. And remember, when Ali and Frazier fought Manila, they were 33 and 31, and it was supposedly a battle of old men.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you the mindset in boxing. But also another fact that these young phenomenons who come up like Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, beating Sonny Liston at age 22, Floyd Patterson, the youngest heavyweight champion in history, Floyd Patterson. Not
Tyson. I agree.
Tyson is the youngest heavyweight belt holder in history. But Floyd Patterson is the youngest world heavyweight champion in history. Let's make that clear. But Patterson was 21. Tyson was 20. And we had, that slipped under the radar on the Joyce Zhang card was this heavyweight. Though Mac, actually, our producers, Mac and Linda, brought to my attention Moses Itamo, 18 years old. He'd had 2 fights before that, 2 pro fights, and they lasted a combined 58 seconds. Now, in all respect to his 2 opponents, that is pretty pathetic when 2 guys last less than a minute. One guy I could understand, you happen to land a punch. That could happen to anyone at any time. That's understood. Like John Ruiz getting knocked out in 19 seconds by David Tua. That could happen. So what happens with Itama, correct my pronunciation, he fights this Ukrainian Konstantin Dabashenko, who'd had 22 professional fights. He had a record of 9-12-1, but had never been stopped.
Never been stopped.
And he forced the young 18-year-old Itama to go to full 6 rounds. And I don't want to say expose him, but make him look like less than the world beater that people are making him out to be. Even my publication, Boxing News, was saying, oh, can he beat a heavyweight champion in the next 2 years, get there at a younger age than Tyson to be a belt holder? And maybe he can because he has good form, good technique. But, guys look good if you match them with the right opponents. But if you don't, all of a sudden they become exposed and they're less than world beaters. And I think that's what maybe happened to Joe Joyce. Tell me this also, Frank, am I crazy? Had Joe Joyce been allowed to continue, assuming he wouldn't quit on his own, do you get the feeling he may have actually won the fight?
Jack,
that Zhang was going to tire. He looked like he was tiring.
But I think Zhang was pacing himself because he knew Joyce was doing that. Jack, I don't think that's a reach that maybe Joyce pulls it out. But what surprised me, and it touches on what Joe says a little bit, did Joyce leave it in the gym? I don't know. I don't want to say that as an excuse. I thought he came in a little bit light, and his punches looked like they had no effect at all on Zhang. So I don't know what happened that night. I think it was a case of Joyce's toughness was propped him up a little bit. I think a southpaw with a punch totally threw him off. We knew Joyce had no defense. We just thought that he would wear him down like he does everybody else. But apparently, Zhang is a little bit stronger, a little bit better puncher than most people thought. I don't know anybody who picked Zhang to win. Not one person did I read pick him to win. Everybody said later stoppage, maybe a decision, and it just didn't happen that way.
I was hearing the consensus was later stoppage by Joyce, 8 or 9 rounds, but Joyce would have some rough patches to navigate early on. You know, that it would be pretty competitive early, and then he would.
But he got drilled early, Jack, and I think it took a little of the fight out of him.
I mean, those straight lefts. I mean, hitting, but you want to know something? You're supposed to avoid them. Those punches were predictable. They seemed to be coming from left field. I mean, they weren't quick, short hooks. They weren't quick combinations on Joyce.
No, but Joyce is so slow, Jack, that they looked like they were a little quicker than they actually were. Remember, Corey Sanders did the same thing to Klitschko, only Corey Sanders has fast hands. And he caught Klitschko. He came out and jumped on him. And the same thing with those lefts. And Vladimir had no clue where they were coming from and couldn't stop him. And that seemed to be the case with Joyce. Again, only 15 fights, but going in, you could make the case that he beat better opposition than Zhang did. So, you know, look, it's a bad matchup. I don't know if we'll see them fight again. After seeing that, I don't think the result would be any different. And one more thing.
It doesn't make sense for Zhang to have a rematch with Joe.
No, although he said he would, it doesn't make sense. But let me just.
I was going to say they would.
Let me just say this so I can take care of you and Joe with one sentence. Joe Bergman, that is. Joe, I see your point. Joshua would not fight Joyce as aggressive like you and Jack believe. In fact, he'd have more trepidation fighting him because he probably realizes that he can't knock him out, and he knows if he hits him with his best and Joyce keeps coming at him, Joshua knows he'll get tired and his chin might get checked. So I think Joyce, even now, would pick Joshua. I know I'm tough on Joshua. I have no confidence in Anthony Joshua after seeing him post Ruiz.
I didn't say that Anthony Joshua would be aggressive against Joe Joyce. He wouldn't have to be. Joyce would take the fight to Joshua. Joshua would have to hit Joyce a lot or he's going to be run out of the ring. He would have to stand up to him with stiff, hard punches. It wouldn't be a hard guy for him to reach. Maybe Joyce would be able to withstand that attack, get hit a lot, get beat up, and eventually prevail against Joshua. That's a reasonable possibility, but he would be hitting Joyce a lot.
He would hit him good, Jack. I just don't think he'd be committing to the punches.
But listen, we'll see. I'm not crazy about the spot Anthony Joshua is in, how he looked against Jermaine Franklin, but the Anthony Joshua that lost the rematch to Usyk, that Anthony Joshua would, handle Joyce with some room to spare. The one that lost the rematch.
We disagree on that, but Jack, where does Zhang go now? Where does he go? Is he going to fight Fury? He's already calling out Fury and Usyk. He's going to be a mandatory for one of them. Fury has to fight somebody. Where's Zhang go?
I would line up to fight Zhang if I were the top guys because he's very beatable. Very beatable. That long straight left, his power punch, is it really going to knock out a guy like Usyk? Usyk has had so many amateur fights.
Usyk can match up with him, Jack, because he can fight on the move.
For Usyk he's as comfortable in the ring as we are sitting on the sofa watching TV. He's not going to be run out of the ring with that long left. He'll navigate the troubled waters for a few rounds and then wear Zhang out and stop him. Fury, big, tall guy, would actually be more reachable, bigger target. But you have to figure Fury is just way too good for fighter.
Fury I can see him outboxing Zhang.
But
I don't know if he can. He can't muscle him though like he does these other guys, Jack, because the guy's 6'6" and he's strong. He can't drape him and try to tire him out like he does the other guys. I think Fury matches up better with Usyk. I'm sorry, Fury matches up better with Zhang than Usyk does. I would pick both of them to beat him, but I'd be a little less confident in Usyk because I think Joyce would be dangerous to Usyk. If you notice, Usyk, he marks up really bad during fights, even when he wins and he kind of jogs to victory. I think that size and that pressure would get to him. Again, I favor Usyk, but I wouldn't consider Zhang beating him in upset. But aside from those two, who else would you pick to beat him?
Zhang, listen, just about anyone. I pick Joyce in a rematch, believe it or not. I would pick Joyce to beat Zhang in a rematch. I would think he wouldn't be hit as hard as often as early, so his eye wouldn't swell shut. If his eye didn't swell shut and he was allowed to stay in the fight, I have to believe he would have gotten Zhang very late. I thought Zhang was tiring. That was my impression. And they had more than half the fight to go when it was stopped.
I don't know if I could pick Joyce to reverse that fight, Jack. I don't know. Would I be surprised? No, but I don't know if I could pick him to do that. Joe, I love you, brother, but Fury and Usyk destroying Zhang, I don't know about that.
You know what the intriguing guy in the heavyweight division is? Deontay Wilder. Because if Deontay Wilder doesn't detonate someone with his power, he loses rounds. Deontay Wilder would have a hard time beating any of the top guys by decision. So that's the thing with Deontay Wilder. You know, Deontay Wilder gets Zhang, interesting fight. I think Zhang can reach Deontay Wilder. And I think Zhang can take Wilder's power early in the fight because he's such a big guy. It becomes hard to knock out a guy who's weighs what?
But he would get hit really clean coming in, Jack.
But when you're a big guy that size, you absorb blows better. You know,
that would be an intriguing fight.
Right. It would.
But he would, Jack, remember though, he would be right there, and he's up, he's tall, he's a big target coming straight in. Wilder could definitely line that right hand up, and that would be the fight. He'd either get him out or then he'd lose.
I would pick.
But Jack, did you see what was proposed today that Eddie Hearn said about the two fights in Saudi on the same card?
Eddie Hearn says a lot of things. I think the 4 fighters, heavyweight elimination, something. What were his 2 fights?
It was going to be Fury versus Usyk. The undercard fight would be Wilder and Joshua, and they'd have the winners fight. And supposedly there's like
Eddie Hearn is talking nonsense.
And then Fury came out and reiterated that.
Nonsense, grandstanding. Who's going to promote? Usyk and Fury was something that top-ranked Bob Arum and Frank Warren were in charge of. What can they afford to pay Wilder and Joshua for an undercard? Unless there's so much money in Saudi Arabia, the people there absolutely have to have it.
I don't think that's a reach, Jack, because they're trying to do that. They're trying to get the big fights there, and that would be almost unprecedented.
If they put those 2 fights together, I'm going to make an exception to my rule. I usually don't get pay-per-view because it's a ripoff. I'll pay the $99.99.
That might it would at least be that much. It might even be like $119.
But what boxing's going to do? They'll charge $139.99 for that, $149.99. They'll find a way to spoil it, but it's not that doubleheader. It's not going to take.
It's probably not going to. I would guess, Jack, that they would go $129.99.
I'm going to tell you what might actually take place. There's rumors of an announcement, and I believe there's some merit to it. that Crawford and Spence might actually possibly meet in June. I don't think it's going to happen, but unlike before when I said it was out of the question, it's alive. It's alive. And if they are going to make it June 17th, the perfect time to announce it would be during the day, Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia fight. You have both Spence and Crawford together. What a buzz that creates. What a kickoff that creates. Just to have the two of them and they announced they agreed to terms. So, Frank, that's the big date. Okay? If they haven't announced it by then, it's not happening, unless it's far into the future, kind of like Mayweather Pacquiao. But I actually think there's a shot it could happen.
Why, Jack? Do you think it's because some of the fights look like they're being made now and there's pressure on them and both guys are being forgotten?
No, I think it's a financial thing with both guys. They got no one to fight who they could make any real money with. I mean, Spence was supposed to fight Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman demands too much money. It's not feasible for the promoters, the PBC, to put it on. Now, as far as him moving up to the junior middleweight division, Spence, to avoid Boots' innocent part, not to take that as a mandatory and to bypass Crawford if he wants. Jermell Charlo is in the junior middleweight division. That's his stablemate and his friend. They're both trained by Derek James. So Charlo's out of the question. He has nowhere to go, Spence, and Crawford's got nowhere to go. What's Crawford going to do? Fight Alex Roca, a golden boy, fighter who's his WBO mandatory? That's nonsense. No,
Jack,
no
that makes sense.
They got
what you're saying makes sense.
Fight one another now.
But we're just so used to these fights not happening that I can't get excited about it. It's like it's been so long since we saw both guys. I wouldn't even know how to break that fight down now.
Let me just throw something at you because we're going to analyze Ryan Garcia Tank Davis fight. We hear all this talk on the Showtime network, who's doing the pay-per-view and all, about this being the best fight that could be made in all of boxing. I think I asked you this before, but I'm going to ask it again. Tell me what fight you would rather see. Okay, it's Tank Davis and Garcia compared to these fights. Haney Lomachenko. Which one would you rather see?
Haney Lomachenko.
I'd go with Tank and Garcia because I think it's a more competitive fight. Fury Usyk.
Fury Usyk.
Fury Usyk easily. The heavyweights. Crawford Spence.
Crawford Spence.
Easily to me. Better be Bivol.
Better be Bivol.
Me too.
I'd rather see Fulton and Newey than this one.
I like Canelo and Benavidez.
Canelo and Benavidez.
I go with Tank and Garcia a little more, but I understand where you're coming from. Okay, Canelo and Bivol, a rematch.
Let me think about that. Canelo Bivol.
Close. So
that's close, Jack, because we already saw that.
Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, if it could be made.
Stevenson Haney.
Okay, so there you go, Frank. I wasn't counting, but you named approximately
at least 6
dozen fights. Right, you'd rather see more. But listen, let's credit Tank and Garcia. They're fighting. If Tank wasn't due to be sentenced, would they be fighting on this date? I'm not so sure. I can't say absolutely, even though my feeling is they wouldn't. They would be looking to pick their spots a little more.
Jack, they're both. See, you know what it is? And I'm going to go back and pick on my favorite whipping boy, Floyd Mayweather. If you tell the public enough that you're a star and that you're the best, they will start buying it. And we have Tank saying that he's the face of boxing. He's already a legend. And then Garcia talking about how this is the biggest fight in years. And they just keep on pounding that and pounding it. People start to accept it. Neither guy has stepped up and fought anyone elite until this time. There's no belt on the line. Neither guy has a claim to be the best lightweight in the world. It's just two young guys that are immensely gifted, that can talk with two big names in Mayweather and De La Hoya behind them. And they've talked this into being a big fight. And I am a little shocked over the buzz that it is getting. To me, it's not as good as Rosario and Chavez, which we saw on HBO. And I guarantee you, walking down the street, if we polled guys, nobody knows who these guys are except boxing fans.
Yeah, but I will say this. Tank Davis, I feel, has established himself more than Ryan Garcia as far as a name, opponents. Ryan Garcia's kind of a potential breakout star. Depending on what happens in this fight, if he gets knocked out in a few rounds, he goes to the bottom of the pile. But if he's to upset Tank Davis in this fight, he becomes one of the faces of boxing. If he does it decisively, especially, he's very charismatic. He'll create a buzz. As far as Tank Davis goes, I was shocked when he fought Raleigh Romero when I got to the Barclays Center and I was told the place was sold out. I went like, what? In my wildest dreams, Tank Davis, Raleigh Romero sells out the Barclays Center. Tank Davis, for whatever reason, is the heir apparent to Floyd Mayweather.
I do think, and being attached to Mayweather has helped him, Jack.
Yeah.
And he is gifted, he's skilled, and he can punch, and his fights usually end in an exciting fashion. But let me ask you this, because I haven't thought about this. This just came into my head, and I don't know the answer. I'm going to listen to what you say and see if I can pick up anything off of that to make my mind up. We're going to get to the fight and break it down, but let me ask you this. Before we pick who wins and how they win and all of that, who does a loss hurt more? Who rebounds back better from a loss? Who can, let's just say it's competitive. Say it's a distance fight. Who rebounds better and has a better story going forward off of a loss?
Depending on how they lost, Frank. Are we talking about a close split decision loss, controversial?
No, Jack. Let's say one of them gets stopped. Because if it's a controversial decision, both guys can go on.
If Tank Davis is to win this fight, now I don't want to give an analysis exactly, but I have to do it to answer your question. If Ryan Garcia is leading on points, Tank Davis comes on late, stops him. It's a bit of a controversial stoppage, okay? Kind of like Carl Froch and George Groves, the first fight. I don't think Garcia loses a great deal. He can rebound from it, and Tank gains something. So I think Garcia would hold his ground. But if it's the other way around and Tank Davis suffers any type of loss, he's still an attraction, but all of a sudden he's not in the mix with the Devin Haney's and the Shakur Stevensons. Right now, you could lump those guys into one category exactly, couldn't you? Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Tank Davis, they're all at the same level, basically. If Tank loses, he's not in that company anymore. He goes from the front seat of the car with the other two to the back. Okay?
That's a good point, Jack, but you can look at it this way too. Ryan Garcia, after this fight, is not going to be a lightweight. He was 140 in his last fight. He has to be 136 here. He can't come in over 146. He's going to move up. I don't see Tank moving up that much, so he's going to be more of a stalwart at 135, where I think Garcia, especially if he wins and it's impressive, I think he's going to say, okay, I conquered 135. I'm going up to 140 to look for Ramirez or Prograis or maybe Lopez, who's ever there. So I think in that sense, Tank can come back. I'm not sure about Garcia. I think a knockout loss will hurt Garcia in a big way because I still think some people think he doesn't have a chin.
Well, let me just say this. If Garcia wins, let's say it's a close fight decision that could go either way, Garcia emerges out of this as a major star. Major. The guy who upset Tank Davis. Even if you come back to me, Frank, after the fight and say, I had it scored 115, 113 for Tank, but Garcia gets the decision. He is one of the biggest names in boxing now because he's charismatic, the following. if Tank beats Garcia in that way, well, it's to be expected. No big deal. Tank could say, oh, it wasn't my greatest performance, but I fought good enough to get the win. He's the same Tank Davis. He has the same appeal. I don't think Tank Davis is going to lose the appeal. Even if he gets knocked down in one round, they can rebuild him as long as he's allowed to fight, and he has a sentencing the next month. So that's the big thing, hanging over his head. But whenever he does return to the ring, they can rebuild a guy who's that charismatic.
Okay, Jack, then let me ask you this. What is a better narrative going forward? Tank winning or Garcia winning?
What's better for boxing? Oh, wow.
That's a tough one.
I don't know, Frank.
They both have a big following. They both have the establishment behind them. They're both exciting. Garcia is a little more charismatic.
I think of their opponents. I mean, who would Tank fight next? If Tank wins in decisive fashion, and let's say the sentencing allows him to get back in the ring in a somewhat timely fashion, what's next? I don't see Tank rushing to fight the likes of Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney, because style-wise, those are very bad styles.
No, you know what Tank's hoping for if he wins this fight? He wants Lomachenko to beat Haney.
He wants,
and then he fights Lomachenko.
You know what gets me? What annoys me? Everyone wants to fight Paul Lomachenko now because he's past his peak. But let me throw this to you: if Lomachenko could turn back the clock 6 years, let's say, he's at his very best. You think any of these guys are going to fight Lomachenko? I mean, they're going to be nervous. They'd be willing to fight him. They might say, "Yeah, I want to fight Lomachenko," but they tell their managers, "Yeah, but you could look at other opponents as well." They wouldn't be licking their chops because they know Lomachenko's a Manny Pacquiao past his peak territory now. Big name, a lot of money. I'm going to be shocked if we're going to talk about it more, but I'm going to be shocked if Lomachenko could pull it off against Devin Haney. I mean, I would be shocked.
Jack, I wouldn't be shocked, but I definitely see that he's the underdog, and I see why. He has everything going against him: size, youth, style. Everything is against him. If he pulls it off, it's huge. But I'm telling you, Tank and team are sitting there, and if they win this fight, they will be crossing their fingers because they want to get Lomachenko, especially with all those belts.
But
all right, Jack, now let's...
It wouldn't happen. Let me just say very quickly, because Lomachenko is promoted by Top Rank, Bob Arum's Top Rank. They also promote Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson is a Top Rank fighter. Tank Davis is not. So that would throw a monkey wrench into it. Exactly. So Shakur Stevenson would get the shot at Lomachenko.
It's funny, Jack? And now that you said that, I could actually see if Tank wins and Lomachenko loses, but it's a good fight, I could see Tank and Lomachenko fighting then. That would still sell.
Who knows? I'm surprised, Frank, with all the big fight announcements. I mean, you're usually on top of your game. I mean,
don't talk about Diaz and Jake Paul.
How did you know, Frank? I mean, you know when the punches are coming from you, you're blocking them all.
We've been doing this long enough. I know your little traps and setups. Okay. And what does it show, Jack? It shows that Jake Paul, who has improved, he's not a joke or a laughing stock, but he fights one real boxer. He loses. Now he's going back to fighting MMA guys.
But he challenged Floyd Mayweather. He would have a big weight advantage over Floyd, and Floyd's an old guy. Would you give Jake Paul a small chance at upsetting an old Floyd Mayweather?
Absolutely. He's too big.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right, Jack, the moment of truth has arrived. The big fight is here. Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia. Let me just go over the records are Davis, 28-0, 26 knockouts. King Rye, 23-0, 19 knockouts. One guy is 5'10" easily. The other guy's probably a stretch 5'6". Tank is a southpaw. Garcia is conventional, tall, long. Both guys can punch. Both guys have quick hands. What do you think we're going to see on Saturday night? And are you going to purchase it?
I'm not going to. I'm tempted a little because I subscribe to the Zone, and this show is $85
Right.
normally. If you don't subscribe to the Zone, it's $60 if you subscribe to the Zone. But once again, they're not giving you a full undercard that's worthy of. I don't think I'm going to. I hate to say.
I plan on it. Let me ask you this before we get to that. One thing there's two things that no one has talked about regarding this fight, at least that I've seen. One, how will the legal issues hanging over Tank's head, how do we think that affects him? Does it draw everything out of him and he knows that, like, he wins this fight, he's impressive, he can take care of the legal issues, and he has his place etched in boxing, and maybe if he wins, it might even help him with some of the legal issues. How do we see this as far as affecting him? Will it make him better or will it hinder him?
I have no idea. Everyone handles the situation differently. It's hard to believe Tank can't be thinking about, wow, when the fight's over, what am I going to do? I have to meet the judge. You never know what's going through his mind. Could his mindset be, oh, no, I don't think they're going to do anything to me, blah, blah, blah. They'll maybe put me on the house arrest for a while. I'll be 3-4 months in my house. I'll have everything at my disposal. I'll have my food delivered here. I'll have this. I'll play my games. I have maybe he has a gym in his house. He'll work out there, keep in shape, and who knows what's going through his mind. Or he could be scared to death. He could be really, nervous. Or maybe something you mentioned, Frank, has entered his mind. I gotta win this fight because if I lose, it might hurt me in sentencing. As crazy as it seems, it shouldn't be an issue at all.
No, it should have no bearing on it at all.
At all, but maybe that's his mindset. Maybe that's the way he's thinking.
Jack, if you remember, before the first Ali Frazier fight, Ali had the draft case hanging over his head because the Supreme Court ruled, but they didn't announce their ruling until 3 months after the fight. That had to weigh on his mind, but I think that he blocked it out. He was a top pro. I get the feeling that Davis is kind of cut from that cloth. I'm not saying he's Ali. I'm just saying I think he understands that he has to take care of business here. This is his career riding on it. This is the fight he's going to be remembered for. I think it will not be a factor. I think he will block it out.
Keep this in mind, though, Frank. Should this be a consideration? It was Ryan Garcia who forced the issue to make this fight happen. He's the one that really forced it. Ryan Garcia, notice, he didn't force the issue with Devin Haney for a fight. He didn't force the issue with Shakur Stevenson.
And he also didn't take a tune-up either.
Right. He went directly for Tank Davis. Why? Why Tank Davis? A big puncher, very talented, a guy who's on the level of Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson. Like we said a little while ago, we lumped those three in the same category as far as talent, this, that. Pretty similar. You could argue, you could say Devin Haney's the best, Shakur Stevenson is the best, even Tank. But what I'm trying to say, they're all the same level, basically. Yet Ryan Garcia only went after this one guy, Tank Davis. The
only thing I can think of that, Jack, is he thinks it's the biggest money and Tank is the most vulnerable because of his size.
Exactly. I think a bigger factor than this as far as Ryan Garcia goes, Tank forced him to make weight. And he has a rehydration clause where he can only gain so much weight after
10 pounds. He cannot come in the ring over 146.
He's a naturally big guy. What happens if this happens, Frank? This element. What happens if at the weigh-in something wild happens. Ryan Garcia weighs 139 pounds. I mean, what I'm sure there's some financial clause in there where he loses X amount of money, but sometimes a fighter knows he's going to make X amount and he's willing to lose the money to,
Mayweather did that with Marquez.
Danny Jacobs did that with Canelo. He weighed more than the contract called for, figuring, hey, I'm not going to strain to make weight. I'd rather pay, the fines. I'm paying $1 million or $2 million out of 12, but I'm going to be much stronger and I'm going to make my money back when I win this fight because I'm going to be strong. I mean, there are those factors.
I don't think it's plausible that Garcia won't make weight, and I'm sure there's something baked in there to take care of that. I don't think it's plausible, but that leads me to the next topic, Jack. Who does the catch weight favor? If Garcia is 146 in that ring on Saturday night, he's a welterweight. Tank is probably a natural 130-pounder. That's a big difference with those little guys.
Frank, I'm not sure about that. You're as old school as anyone, Frank. Remember when lightweights at 135 would fight welterweights at 147? They'd meet in the middle. The guy who you label as the greatest ever, Sugar Ray Robinson, and you have plenty of company that agrees with you. When he'd have those fights against Jake LaMotta, he'd give up a lot of weight in fights like that. People just look at the results. I think one stand.
Tank is no Robinson, Jack.
No, but the point is, Garcia, is the.
I mean, Jack, he's 5'10". If he's 147, he's 5'10". He's as big as Donald Curry. Tank's ceiling is 135. He's making Garcia, who was 140 in his last fight, come down to 136, and he's limiting him to a weight that he can't go over before they get in the ring.
These guys grow anyway. Before Tank's career is over, he's going to be a welterweight at least before his career is over. So you don't know how he could be growing right now, what his progression could be,
How old is Tank, Jack? He's what, 28 or 29?
Yeah, but it changes. You never know in a fight like this. I wonder, was it put in the contract if Tank didn't make weight? I heard Tank had all the advantages. Garcia even said, I gave him every advantage just to make the fight happen. That shows the level of confidence Garcia has. Now, look, who we're picking. Let's get to the point, Frank.
One more thing. Let me just touch on one thing you said. If Tank ever fights as a welterweight, I'll tell you right now, he will not be an effective one. He's too small. No way.
I mean, look at guys like Manny Pacquiao went all the way up to welterweight.
That's a once-in-a-lifetime fighter.
He went up to welterweight eventually. It's much older than what, Tank is now. Guys are just, it's hard to stay at a weight your whole career, especially.
But, Jack, the welterweights now are coming down from 180. That would be a big jump for Tank. So, anyhow, I do think that the weight probably favors Tank, and I attribute that to him learning at the feet of Floyd Mayweather of how to make a fight.
You always blame Floyd Mayweather, Frank. I mean,
I do, Jack, but I will also do this. When I blame him, he's a genius.
You're going to blame Floyd Mayweather for a tax increase by the government because he flaunts all his money because of the money Mayweather.
Jack, the guy's a genius. He's the smartest mind ever in the history of boxing.
He's the smartest manager in the history of
boxing. Absolutely.
Manager, okay. You're calling him the greatest of all time as a manager. Okay.
As a manager, yes. And I think Tank learned, and just based on this contract, it seems that he made less concessions.
He's not with Mayweather technically anymore. You see,
no, he's not, Jack, but he was under his umbrella for a long time and had a lot of late conversations with Mayweather about the game and the business of the game for years. So I'm sure he has that all in here. And again, I think we both agree he probably got the better of the negotiations. All right, Jack, give me your take on the fight.
One thing I learned, Frank, my take of the fight, any fight, once you have an opinion who's going to beat who, you shouldn't change your prediction, overanalyze it, because
You must have read my notes.
yeah, I mean, I think I'm more susceptible to hype than you are. How do you like that? I'm putting myself down.
No, I fell into the Joe Joyce hype, Jack. I never thought he was good, and I picked him.
I start hearing all the hype that goes on around the fight. And it's like a political campaign. They actually start convincing me. I start believing this. When the fight was first made for Garcia Tank, I unhesitatingly picked Garcia. I even went on the show. I told you, Frank, Garcia's going to shut Tank down. I said it a while ago. Now I'm hearing Tank's got the punch. Garcia's untested. This. Tank is favored. Everyone I talk to seems to be picking Tank. So I want to pick Tank. He's closing in on Garcia, my prediction. But no, I'm going to hold firm. Garcia is going to beat Tank for this reason. Tank Davis tends to give rounds away. He admits he likes to take his time. Had Ryan Garcia been in the ring at the Barclays Center instead of Rowley Romero, Tank wouldn't have won that fight. I mean, Tank was so methodical. He didn't have a worry in the world. I could see this being a Hagler-Leonard type fight. Tank being very methodical, Garcia putting rounds in the bank early, Tank coming on with a late rush, closing the gap, maybe knocking Garcia down late. Final bell rings, a lot of uncertainty who won the fight. Garcia emerges with a close split decision. He doesn't maybe shut Tank down completely the way I said early, but he does it enough, certainly the first half of the fight. I see him forging up to 5-1 lead. Okay? And then winning 2 of the last 6, maybe getting dropped, 1-point victory. Ryan Garcia wins a disputed decision, split decision. So I see the upset happening.
All right. I'm going to go a little more X's and O's. I think Tank checked more boxes in most facets of boxing, along with better basics and fundamentals. I know he's a small target, and he knows how to make that his advantage against taller guys and longer opponents. I think he's going to try to get Garcia to come to him, overcommit, and lunge, leaving him open for shots inside, up the middle, and around. Garcia presses in a straight line. He retreats in a straight line. I think that's something Tank can exploit. I think Tank has the better aptitude. I think he knows Garcia is probably going to try to force it to stay outside. They're both quick. I think Tank is a little quicker mentally. I think he's going to try to induce Garcia to trade, but only on his terms, to run him into some kind of trap. They're both fast. I think Tank has a better two-handed assault. I think it's going to come down to durability and chin. I sense Garcia, Jack, thinks he needs to win by a knockout. I think Tank sees the bigger picture. I think if Garcia doesn't try to force the fight one way, I think his chances go way up. It's a tough call. I think Garcia, size will be a factor. He has a nice jab. That left hook is there. He has a proverbial puncher's chance. But as you said, once you make a pick, you have to go with your first instinct. You've almost convinced me that maybe it is Garcia. I'm going to stay with my pick of Tank. Jack, it's too tough of a call for me to say for sure decision or knockout. If it's a decision, I think that favors Garcia, but I could see Tank getting a late stoppage. My pick is Tank, but I'm not going to say I can predict how he's going to win by knockout or decision. I just think he'll have his hands raised. I'm not as sure as I was. Again, I think he's the better overall technician. I think he has more ways to win. I think he can take advantage of Garcia's over exuberance. And again, I think Garcia feels a knockout is what he has to do, where Tank, I think, will take what Garcia gives him and will be just as happy winning a decision or by winning by a stoppage. And also, I'm going to say the fact that Tank got the conditions that he wanted with the weight So I'm going to go with Tank, but Jack, it's not a strong lean. It's a tough fight. To me, they both have unknowns. I don't know how good Tank's chin is. I don't know how good Garcia's is. I think that's going to go a long way in this fight. But the pick here is Tank.
I think Tank Davis is the more explosive puncher in the
Yes.
fight. I know Garcia's got the great left hook, and he actually watches films of Sugar Ray Robinson when he knocked out a guy with a short hook. Garcia was talking immediately afterwards, Robinson and Gene Fulmer. You know, the impression he left on him, the exact punch. He says,
Right.
I've been working on it in the gym. But I just feel that, you know, Tank is a tremendous puncher. And the unknown is Garcia's chin. I mean, I dismiss the Luke Campbell knockdown for the most part. People say, well, if Luke Campbell can knock him down, imagine what Tank.
He got caught with a good, but he got up and took over.
It happens to anyone. Listen,
Right.
Henry Cooper knocks down Cassius Clay with a left hook, and everyone said, well, if Cooper can knock him down with a left hook, Liston's going to obliterate him. It doesn't work out that way usually. You need more of like a body of work where a guy can't take a punch. Anyone can get hit hard. I just feel with Tank Davis, he can't be too methodical in this fight because when he finally turns the engine on after Garcia, he might be too far behind in the scoring, and Garcia might fight well enough to hold him off and maintain.
Jack, if Tank is down by a lot, that could definitely be a scenario. But one thing I also think works in Tank's advantage, I think his size takes away Garcia's left hook to the body. Yeah. And that's something he likes to do. He sets that up, or he'll go to the head, then he'll come down to the body, or he'll feed you a couple to the body and then come up to the head. I think Tank being short, like a Dwight Quawi for his weight, there's no body there to hit, and Tank's fundamentals are good, and he can block that and catch it and then counter. So I think that's an issue too. But Tank can't get far behind because he then has to go in and follow the puncher, and I don't think that's him at his best. I think him at his best will be getting Garcia to overcommit, to lunge, to look for the big shot. I think if he goes after him, I think he sets himself up more to get hit and hurt.
I'll say this too. Whoever wins the fight, they might take different paths. If Tank wins the fight, I get the feeling he's going to start entering Canelo Alvarez territory. He won't have to fight a Shakur Stevenson or Devin Haney. He can avoid them and be enough of an attraction, okay, to basically cherry pick. That's what I think what Tank Davis might happen. Eventually, he's going to have a big fight, obviously, but I think he'll be so big. I get the feeling if Garcia wins, there's something about him. He's going to want to tangle with the Tigers. He's going to want big fights. Maybe one easy fight, but he's definitely going to want at some point go in there with, maybe Devin Haney, who he fought a lot as an amateur. That's just a feeling.
So you think Tank has more of the business mindset where Garcia is thinking legacy?
Well, Showtime, they handle Tank. It means a lot for ratings, whoever Tank is going to fight going forward. Because Tank's already a major attraction. If he beats Garcia impressively, let's face it, he's one of the biggest names in boxing. He's on the short list. Like I said, he entered Canelo Alvarez's territory.
Jack,
maybe a step behind, but nevertheless.
Let's address what Joe says before we go. Joe, you said about the same-day weigh-ins. I actually like same-day weigh-ins. I think if this was a same-day weigh-in fight, it would very much favor Tank in a big way. I like that. I don't like guys winning fights on the scales and having 36 hours where they only have to make weight for a minute. I like the same day, the 10 o'clock in the morning weigh-in. This way, the guys fight 12 hours later. They can't overindulge themselves too much because they got to fight that night. So I like that better. If that was in play, I think it would favor Tank. Jack, what do you think about same-day weigh-in?
I have mixed feelings. I go back and forth. I notice when fighters get seriously injured, it's rarely a heavyweight. Okay, it's guys who are trying to make the weight.
Absolutely.
It always happens in the later rounds of a fight. I go back and forth on that question, Frank. I mean,
So you think it's a safety issue?
it's a safety issue, absolutely. Yeah,
It is funny that heavyweights hit the hardest, but they have the least deaths
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're not draining and they have fluid in their head. Their skull's not crashing
Right.
against a dehydrated.
I'll be traveling next
Their
week.
brain's not.
I'll be traveling next week, so I won't be doing the show. But with you and Bernard Fernandez, you'll have a lot to talk about. And I'll catch the show wherever I am. At the very worst, on replay right after you guys.
So if I'm wrong, I don't have to hear you for a week that I was wrong on this one.
Yeah, and if I'm wrong, I won't even talk about it. I'll say it's past this week. Okay.
All right, Jack. We'll have safe travels.
Thanks.
Thanks for
Take
watching,
care.
everybody. See you next week.